Right, have you got those rambling boots on? If so, let's go for a meander back to the early 1950s. Children's lives were lived outside back then. Bedrooms were just rooms for sleeping in. The house was for eating in. And between mealtimes and bedtimes, the street was for everything else. We were lucky. Our street sloped, so we kids had our own go-kart track, roller skating rink, and a brilliant place to learn to ride a bike by coasting down it, and when we needed to brake, dragging our shoes on the tarmac. I recall my older sister giving me a push at the top and me talking to her on the way down, only to find, when she didn't answer, that she wasn't behind me holding the saddle to balance me as I thought. I was doing it on my own. As there she was, back at the top of the slope, clapping. I'd passed a rite of passage. I was no longer a scooter, I was now a biker. I didn't own a bike, but that was okay. We had a street bike that we all rode. I've no idea who it actually belonged to. It belonged to the street. The same principle of ownership applied to roller skates. It didn't matter what size shoes you were, as they fitted everyone. They just strapped onto your shoe with a sliding adjustment for length. I recall my first try on these wobbly wheels. After doing the dance of danger with both feet unable to keep contact with the floor, I resorted to just having one on and kind of scooted on that until the big day when feet and ground managed to cooperate together. The big estate we lived on had been built to accommodate large families. They were much more commonplace then because birth control hadn't been available. We were a family of 5 children at that time, as were the family next door and the family across the street. So that's 15 children between just 3 houses. So you can imagine what a gathering of kids there were at any one time, as we were number 178 and about halfway down the road. Very few people owned a car back then, so we were free to scoot, skate and bike until our stomachs told us it was time to go in, or we were exhausted and ready for sleep. Mothers, usually with babies in big prams, would stand and chat together, and firm friendships were established. And any one of those neighbours could and would reprimand you if you were doing something you shouldn't. There seemed to be a shared bringing up going on. I was 7 when we moved away, but I can still vividly recall a few scenes from that time that demonstrate that the freedom we had wasn't just because there were very few vehicles about, but also because we weren't consumed with assessing risk. We kids were able to experiment without constant supervision of adults. We were expected to fall off bikes and crack our heads and scrape our knees. Health and safety just wasn't an issue as far as I can recall. We weren't obsessed with keeping clean, rather the opposite. You could gauge the level of fun we'd had that day by how grimy we were by home time. So here's scene 1. Picture this. Well, nowadays, if a child picked up a lollipop stick out of the gutter, we'd probably rush over with a packet of antibacterial wipes and put that down. Don't put that in your mouth. It's dirty. In the 1950s, we rushed over with excitement because Mum needed them to make toffee apples. Well, she had a glut of apples. What else was she going to do with them? I distinctly remember her calling us over and giving us an important job to do. We were instructed to go and search the street for used lollipop sticks, discarded after the ice cream man had been down. What excitement! Toffee apples. We searched and searched the gutters, the pavements, the gardens, collecting as many as we could find, and some of them must have been weeks old, and then triumphantly handing them over to the confectioner. I was so proud that was my mum. Hygiene didn't seem to be in people's vocabulary back then. Looking back, it didn't seem to be something anyone thought about much in those days. These sticks had been in children's mouths and then thrown away, where they'd probably been run over on bikes and skates. But once they'd been washed, they were put straight into the apples. I remember a big saucepan being put on and being directed to tell all the kids to come to our side passageway. And there we were, a long line of wiggling, grubby kids, jiggling about with excitement and waiting for our turn to reach up into the open kitchen window to have the stick carefully handed to us. No concern about clean hands. I'm certain that food production line wouldn't pass modern food hygiene standards, but the toffee apples tasted wonderful. And here's scene 2. My 5-year-old sister is jumping up and down and loudly crying and trying to talk at the same time, and it's not working. No one knows what's happened, but when between the sobs and the yelling, she did eventually get it out, it was all a bit gruesome for my 7-year-old ears. No wonder she was crying. Andrew Alcott had forced her to drink her stitches. It sounds bizarre now, but it wasn't unheard of in those days for children to sometimes be given extracted teeth, plaster casts, or even stitches as curiosities. She had had these stitches removed from a war wound, and the nurse had carefully put them in a phial of water for her to take home as a trophy of what a warrior she'd been. Well, I can tell you, she didn't look or sound much like a warrior now. The mischievous 6-year-old boy from across the street had forced her, she said. He'd told her she must, as that was what you were supposed to do with them. And her never want to do anything she thought she mustn't do, and always doing what she was told she must do. Well, she did it, didn't she? Naughty Andrew Alcott. It wasn't only his name that was mud in our house ever after. His mum's name joined him in this category many years later, when in her 70s I was recalling this episode with my mum, and she told me some new information. I had always assumed that Mrs. Alcott was a friend of hers, as we'd laughed about the stitches thing several times over the years. But this time she added a new dimension to the story. New information was dropped in that changed the way I thought of her. Apparently, she suspected Mrs. Alcott of having a thing for my dad and flirting with him. Well, who wouldn't? He was 6'4" and handsome. But I was shocked that she said it and reacted by saying, "No, the tart," which made us both laugh after that. Whenever her name was mentioned thereafter, we would both look at each other and in unison and in a very exaggerated way would say, "The tart," and have a good laugh together. Looking back, I suppose that little stretch of road was our whole world for a while. We didn't have much that belonged to us. The bike belonged to the street. The roller skates were whoever managed to get hold of them. And even a discarded lolly stick could become something worth searching for if there was a toffee apple at the end of it. We fell off things. We scraped our knees. We got filthy. We ate things we probably shouldn't have eaten, including, in my sister's case, her own stitches. And we somehow survived it all. I wouldn't pretend everything was better in the 50s. It wasn't. But I am glad that I knew what it was like to open the front door in the morning and find an entire playground waiting outside. A playground full of bikes, skates, children, neighbours, and apparently the occasional tart. Thank you for listening. You can relieve yourselves of those rambling boots now. If you've enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe. And maybe you can share some of your memories, if you were around in the early 50s, of what your street was like. So until the next time, happy rambling.